corridors, I guess I'll start off. First of all, I hope you enjoy your meal. My name is Pedro De Bruyckere, and last year I've given a talk about the bad and the ugly in education. And I won't do this again because, well, when I'm talking about urban myths, Paul Kirchner will do the same in a couple of hours. Do join his talk. I'll try to talk about the slightly better. Why slightly better? Because perfection doesn't exist in education. And if I say I'll talk about the good, maybe you'll be expecting recipes. And I won't be delivering any kind of recipes. I'll be giving you ingredients to make your own recipe for your specific situation. Now, before I start off with that, still the same message as last year. I'm sorry for my Flinglish. I'm not a native speaker, you've noticed already, and I have a very own variation of English. Sorry for that, but I'm working on it. What I want to discuss today are 7 principles of acquisition of new knowledge and skills, and they're based on a whole bunch of sources. And what I want to do, well, everything is a remix. Many of them maybe you've heard before, but I'll try to explain why do they work, when do they work, but also when do they don't work, because that's as important. Sometimes it's, okay, this works in this situation, don't try it in that situation, because probably you will have a big disaster. So, let's start off with the first one, a very, very simple one. Learning takes time, effort, and motivation. Yeah, I shouldn't have come to England for this one, I think. But some say that to become skillful in any kind of new area, it takes 50 to 100 hours. And some even say, don't take notes, because some say it doesn't mean it's correct. Some even say that to become an expert, it takes 8 to 10 years. The famous 10,000 hours rule. But wait. Is it really 10,000 hours? No, not at all. Because there are huge differences. For instance, some kids will do it in a much smaller time. Most of the time, these are the kids you really hate. And some people actually will never learn. Actually, this is the most useless machine in the world. The only thing this machine can do is switch itself off. Now, why is it still important to think about motivation and time? Because most of the time, what do we learn in education? We learn the kids at a beginner's level. We don't get experts in the room. Sometimes we do. I'm a teacher trainer, and I remember a situation where one of my students was teaching a class about history, Big Bang Theory, and dinosaurs. Little did he know that his life would end in that classroom. It was near the end of the class, and suddenly, and it sounds that I invented for the story, but it's really a kind of Harry Potter-like boy. I couldn't see the scar, but he had the same glasses. So, sorry, sir, but I think you've made a mistake. Nothing wrong with making mistakes. Everybody does. Teachers too. But then my student made a capital mistake. He answered, I don't think so. And then what followed was an explanation of approximately 15 minutes by the little Harry Potter boy. And suddenly I noticed that the mentor inside the room was taking notes. I didn't know this. Interesting. Because the hobby of that kid was dinosaurs. He knew every single bit about dinosaurs. Well, that was then a kid who didn't need 10,000 hours. I don't know if he was already alive for such a long period, but he knew a lot. Well, I have to switch this. If you look at time, effort, and motivation, there's one thing that I want to warn you for, and this is the curse of knowledge. I know those colleagues aren't present today, but you all know colleagues who claim that their pupils are getting more stupid every single year. What is happening? Every single year, there are kids entering your classroom asking the same questions, because most of them, except the Harry Potter boy, are absolute beginners. But you are building up your own expertise. And so the gap between the pupils and yourself can augment. And there is no direct correlation between expertise and being the best teacher. Because probably you all know very bright people. You know, that guy, he's really smart, or that woman, she's brilliant. I don't understand a word, but she's brilliant. Maybe she's brilliant, but she isn't a great teacher because she can't translate it to the level of the learner. So this is a first thing. Second, concentration spans are short. If you have stages that take longer than 15 minutes, well, make it 12 minutes. I have one advice: don't. Or you get this. To be clear, it's a loop. He doesn't fall asleep every single time, okay? That's why every single joke in my talk is timed to get your attention going, but I don't know. Number 3, distributed practice is more effective. Well, the simple rule is you benefit more from 6 sessions of 20 minutes each than one session lasting 2 hours. Actually, we all know this. Who has been up late as a student cramming stuff for a test the next morning? Who has done this before? Yep. How much did you remember 2 days later? Did you remember anything 2 days later? Not really. We've known this for quite a while. Actually, we've known this from 1885. Yeah, that's a brand new insight in my session. 1885, it's the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Ebbinghaus, what did he do? He said, you know, let's try to learn by heart some non-existing words and check how much you have forgotten after 20 minutes, after an hour. Okay. And Ausubel said, oh wait, based on this, we can have something like spaced repetition. And we've learned that if you repeat stuff with bigger spaces between the repetitions, you can remember more. Great. But most of the time, and these are slides that I've borrowed from David Didow, most of the time, teaching is a string of new stuff to forget. You have one class you can forget about, a second class you can forget about, and so on. Well, one of the most beautiful design studies from 2014 did something very special. They took 3 groups. Now I have to come over here. Group A. Hi, that's you. Good afternoon. How are you? Everything fine? Yeah? Group A, you were given traditional classes. Okay. Group B, well, you got the masked spaced repetition. This group outperformed Group A by 6.5%. The teaching was similar, only added was the spaced repetition. 6.5% looks nice, great. But there was also a Group C. And Group C, well, for them we used some technology. Amazon. I have to explain this. Who bought something already on Amazon or a similar site? Yeah, well, people who bought this also bought this. People who made this mistake often made also this mistake. So the repetition was personalized. Ma'am, you made this mistake. He made the same mistake, but also made that mistake. You didn't, but to be sure, we will be also repeating that one that he did. This group outperformed Group B by 10%. Outperformed Group A without altering the teaching by 16.5%. Wow, looks nice, but wait a minute. This is one study. More peculiar, it's more specific. It's one study about learning Spanish with students. Do we have the same results for math? We don't know. Do we have the same results for learning German? We don't know. Well, this gap, 6.5%, that's an average that's returning in many studies, so we know about this. We need a lot of more research on this figure. But for me, it's a very interesting thing to, well, replicate. And so if you want to replicate it, because it's quite easy design, and all the technology they used were open source, actually, and I included the link to the study in my presentation, and it's called Personalized Review. And actually, it's a combination of something very old, something very new. Now for something blue. Prior knowledge, and this is a big one, and I've been talking quite a lot until now. Now I want you to think. First of all, are there any psychologists in the room? Except Paul. Or other people in the room who know the Wesen test? Nobody? If you recognize the test, do me one favor. Shut up. For the other people, another advice, think for yourself, because your neighbor will be wrong. Okay? I want to do a little test with you to make my point, and I have good news. We have the habit of giving people 2 chances. So if it doesn't work out the first time, you'll get a second chance. We're like that in Belgium, actually, and a 3rd chance and a 4th chance. That's how I survived. Okay, the first chance. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. I'll show you 4 cards. A card with an A, a D, a 4, and a 7. Just to be sure, everybody is seeing the cards? Yeah, okay, luckily. Which cards do you need to turn over in order to determine if this rule is true or false? If a card has a vowel on one side, then it has an even number on the other side. How many cards and which one? And try to do it with as fewest cards as possible. I'll give you a minute to think about it. Okay. Who can solve this with turning over only 1 card? Yeah. Who needs 2 cards? Who needs 3 cards? Who's wondering what's this about? Okay, the majority. Okay. Who is turning over cards with the letter A on it? Yeah. Who turns over the letter D? Yeah. Who is turning over the letter 4? Yeah, majority. Who turns over the 7? Well, in correct circumstances, you're alone in a room with real cards. The majority will pick A and 4. Actually, a bit similar to this group. And this is wrong. Because the correct answer is A and 7, but I won't explain yet why. Because first I want to give you a second chance. Let's go to a pub. It's getting more interesting by the minute. Okay. What we do is, you enter a pub and you see 4 men in a bar. Try to imagine the 4 men in the bar. And one is drinking a beer. One is drinking a Coke, probably me. The third one You know him. He's a colleague. He's 35 years old. But there is a beer there, there's a Coke there. You don't know what he's drinking. And the fourth one is maybe one of your pupils. He's 16 years old, but you don't know if he's drinking a beer or a Coke. But you're a responsible teacher. So, which man do you need to ask their age or what they drink in order to determine if this rule is true or false? If a man is drinking a beer, then he must be 18 years or older, or he has to move to Belgium. Who will ask the guy drinking a beer how old he is? Show me the hands. Yeah. Who will ask the guy drinking a Coke how old he is? Yeah. Who will ask the 35 years old what he's drinking? Who will ask the 16-year-old what he's drinking? Now, most of you picked the first one and the last one. And this is correct. Yeah. But I've given you the same... Oh, I'll go back to there. I've given you the same test twice. And the first time, it was very complicated to solve. And the second time, it was easy. Most of you were correct. Actually, in perfect circumstances, when you're alone in a room and you get to solve this puzzle, 9 out of 10 have it correct. How come? Well, this is a working memory test. And I found this with Geek 2009. And he says, he introduced another kind of metaphor for the working memory. It's a spam filter. There's so many information entering your view, your senses. You have to select. And on which basis do you select? You select on prior knowledge. What do you recognize? Now, wait a minute. This has huge impact to understand a couple of things. Imagine, I have 2 boys over here. You two. Hi. What's your name, sir? James and? Rufus. Hi, James. Hi, Rufus. Imagine James and Rufus both sitting inside my classroom. James comes from an average family, but has seen the world a bit. He's been to Rome, he's been to Greece. Rufus never left his city. I'm both teaching them history, ancient history. Who will have a benefit by definition? And Rufus can't help it. Because, for instance, if I work with discovery learning, well, if you look at Hattie and Yates, they describe that the feeling of well-being will be great by both. But the gap between the strong students and the weak students, not because they are different in intelligence, but even because of the background, will augment. While, at the same time, if you use direct instruction, the gap will become more narrow. Not because James is doing less, but because Rufus is augmented. But wait a minute. It comes with a price sometimes, because the feeling of well-being, well, it will be maybe less. Now, I have given you one of the best reasons to give enough variation in education. Because one size fits all doesn't exist. So one of the best, most effective methods to get basic knowledge with your pupils is direct instruction. But can you use direct instruction for everything? No, because then you will have one size fits all. It's more interesting. Maybe you need to know which basic knowledge your pupils need to do other stuff. So you can give them direct instruction when needed for that, so they are ready for the rest. But maybe it means that I have to take Rufus and some other kids separate, differentiate, to get them on the level so they can work together with James. And now I've explained what can be some of the reasoning behind picking which kind of approach. It has to do with which kind of goals, which kind of prior knowledge, and so on. That's why I didn't have any recipes, but ingredients. Okay, number 5. Multimedia works. Great. And just to be clear, I'm not talking about learning styles. I think you'll go into this much. Okay. But, they are very popular, there's no evidence, and even worse, if you use them, they don't have any effect. If there are still people having doubts, you can win $5,000. Who wants to win $5,000? Interested? Oh, yeah, Rufus, you want to see the world. I understand. What you need to do, this is a real thing. What you need to do to earn $5,000, you take a group of pupils. Take this room, but a bit more. And you take a learning style test at your preferences. For instance, I'll explain it with visual auditory, but you can use whatever you want, Kolb or anything else. Okay? And you divide your group randomly in 2 separate groups. Group A, yo, and Group B, hi again. What you need to do is, ma'am, you're a visual learner, I'll show it to you. You're an auditory learner, I tell it to you. Group A, you'll be teaching in accordingly to the learning style. And Group B, you're a visual learner, too bad, I'll tell it to you. Paul, I know for sure you're an auditory learning, I'll show it to you. You'll teach this group, well, according to the worst learning style for them. The first researcher who can show that Group A outperforms Group B gets $5,000. We've been trying this for decades. Well, actually the price in the first instance was $1,000, but because nobody succeeded, it was augmented to $5,000. So if you want to win $5,000, you know what to do. But there is something better, slightly better. The dual channel theory. Who's heard about the dual channel theory before? Oh, I have to explain that. I could show you this, but that's too abstract. For instance, you take 2 groups. Group A, hi again. Group B, yup. And of course randomly separated. Now, Group A. I show you a video with a little experiment on it and a voiceover explaining it. This is what you are seeing. Clear? Okay. Group B, I'm showing you exactly the same video, the same voiceover, but I've added subtitles in the same language. Now my question for you is, which group will remember the most? Group A or Group B? Who think Group A will remember the most? Yeah? Who thinks Group B will remember the most with the added subtitles? Who think they will remember the same? Okay. Well, a slight majority thinks Group B will outperform Group A, but actually Group B, on average, and that's a crucial word, on average will remember 30% less than Group A. I have to explain why. The idea is we have 2 channels in our mind, one for words, one for images. If you use them both, great. But you can't overload a channel. For instance, you can't read or listen at the same time. So, if you use word in print or sound plus image, good. If you use word in print and sound plus image, it's bad. But as said, a crucial word is average. For instance, we've noticed that if you're teaching mathematics and science, this is a very big thing. If you're teaching languages, the impact is much lesser. And another crucial word maybe you've overheard was subtitles in the same language. For instance, in Holland and in Belgium, Most of the television series and the movies are subtitled, but it's a great way of learning a language. It's not about learning the content, but combining what you are hearing and combining with the subtitles in another language can be very interesting. Now, what we've learned from this, how to prepare a presentation, I have a very simple rule. Keep it simple, stupid. So a bad example is this. This is an eye test. This is slightly better. For me, it's a bit frustrating to see that many people presenting at educational conferences most of the time have very bad slides. PowerPoints. You know where bullet points come from? Of firing bullets to a presenter who annoys you. By the way, this is a little bit extra. You know, Paul, Casper, and I myself, we like to fact check. And we have received the past few years a lot of questions. Is this correct or not? Most of the time, our answer is it's complicated. This one I found, I received from some people. It comes from a book, Made to Stick, by Dan and Chip Heath. And the first time I saw it, I said, oh no, here we go again. If you have an acronym, success. Oh, wait a minute. But actually, it's quite handy. For instance, a simple message. If I say, and you're American, bear in mind, for the next 2 minutes, you're American. If I say, yes, we, that's not American way. Let's do this again. Yes, we. Okay, this is a simple message you can remember. Secondly, unexpected. This is something I've done with you too. And know that the majority will think that the group with subtitles will remember more than the group without subtitles. I made you look. The unexpected element. Being concrete, that's what I've shown you with the Wason test. Did I mention that repetition is important? Then credible, what I've done is very subtle. I was always showing you of a couple of times, check my sources, they are on the slide. I've given you my references so you think I'm credible. I'm not, but you have the idea. Emotion, a good relation between teacher and student is as important as giving feedback. My idea, do them both. And a story helps to remember. Does this mean you need those 6 elements in every single class you ever teach? No, then it becomes a trick. But for me, it's a nice reminder. I have 2 more to go to mention. Number 6, you need an active mind. I could explain you this with a lot of interesting stuff, but I have a great example. All of you maybe have heard about John Hattie, with which thing you do in education has the biggest effect. 6 scientists did the same thing for study methods. And they looked at which study method is the best and which study method is the worst. And there is even one study method, if you use it, you know less after studying than before studying. Imagine that. A study method that helps you to learn to know less. Now you wonder which one it is. Do you know which one? Highlighting. Yeah, yes, you know, if you do it like this, probably it doesn't work, but even this doesn't work. But why doesn't it work? That's more interesting. Who has had this experience? You're a student making a test. You get a question, and you know where the answer is in your book. You know what's written on top of it. You know what's written beneath it. But what was the, oh, it's streamed, beep answer? Who recognizes this? Who has had this before? You know, what's happening? What happens is this. If you write something on a piece of paper, you put a piece of paper in the envelope, you put the envelope in the closet, what will you remember? In best case, where you put the envelope. What you do is, by highlighting, it's sparking the knowledge, and remembering where you parked it. Actually, you don't need to think a lot to highlight. Most of the time you say, okay, this is probably an important word, next one. But you're not thinking. You're not using an active mind. What's the best option? Well, the best option is let pupils themselves think of questions about what they are studying. They write their questions down on a piece of paper, little cards, and on the back side they can write down the answer. But writing down questions is thinking. It's a very active way of using the knowledge. But it's getting even better, because if they have a huge pile of questions, then they can start randomly pick questions and try to answer them. And what you get when you are doing this? Spaced repetition. In this study, in this comparison of all study methods, this was the best study method. Well, this is something you can do tomorrow with on Monday with your students. Number 7 is the most strange thing I want to tell you. Have a vision, but I don't care which one. Yeah, well, I have to explain this. And I've seen this throughout the day, and I will mention once the G word, grammar. But if I look on Twitter, there are people thinking about, but are we going a conservative way or a progressive way? And then always the question arises, which is the best one? Well, Margaret Brown has tried to figure out which has the biggest results. First problem, it's very difficult to define what's conservative and what's progressive. But let's make it easy. Let's compare Korea with Finland. It's very easy to say that Korea is the more conservative option and Finland is the more progressive option. But the results are very similar. If you look at PISA, but also at TIMSS, PEARLS, and many of those tests, you get very similar results. And actually, the differences between progressive schools and conservative schools in the UK are not that different. Why? Well, most of the time this is a policy discussion. I was discussing this with a researcher this week who's actually doing research on the same topic. And she's seen that if first she asked at teachers, are you a conservative or more, the opposite she used was more pupil-centered teacher. And then she checked in the classroom. She couldn't see any difference. Well, because most of the time, teachers are eclectic. So the discussion, progressive, conservative, most of the time is for the top level. But if a progressive teacher notices that a pupil doesn't understand, he or she will switch. And what my colleague also found out with teachers who say, I'm not that pupil-centered, how many questions and how many interaction there was with the students. Much more than the teacher himself or herself taught. But vision is very important for a whole other reason, and this is something I've learned from Daniel Muis. And that is this. It's very important for the learning of the pupil that they experience the school as coherent. So that if they switch a class, they go from a math teacher to a language teacher, they are different. But they are different based on a similar theme. Because they feel the school has one vision, and this gives peace of mind. So for me it's very important, as a school, as a team, have a vision, but I really don't care which one. Now, I've given you 7 principles of acquisition. Learning takes time, effort, and motivation. 2, concentration spans are short. Thank you for bearing with me. Distributed practice is more effective, spaced repetition. Prior knowledge is key. Multimedia works, not the learning style rubbish, but dual channel. You need an active mind. Study methods research I use there. And have a vision. And now, I only can ask you this. Stay both critical and eager to learn. Because one of the biggest things I've been experiencing myself for the past 7 years, examining myths, examining what works, is how little we know. There is still a lot to discover. And one thing I want to add, because there's always a discussion, evidence-based, evidence-informed. There's one thing, it's very important not to forget. John Hattie, Daniel Willingham, Dylan William, Vygotsky, all included in my talk in one way or the other. They don't know your pupils. Me neither. So that's why I didn't want to give you any kind of recipe, but explain you how pepper and salt works, so that you know how spicy it can be for your own pupils. That's evidence-informed. And I've borrowed the phrase evidence-informed from Paul, and he will be discussing this great book in a couple of hours, Urban Myths. I want to thank you for your attention. Any questions you still have? Yeah.
What were your opinions on the first workshop this morning, working memory?
There was a session about working memory, and I've explained in this session, working memory is very important. But I've given a non-psychological answer, how you can deal with it in classroom. Most of the time, it has to do with enough prior knowledge. So the spam filter lets it through. There is a second element, and actually this is a British study. Quite often there are influences that you can't expect, or that you don't expect. Do you know what has had a big influence on learning? The price of the houses. Because if parents worry a lot because they can't pay the price of the house or the rent, then the pupils are also nervous, learning less because their working memory or their mind is busy. This is a study by Shafir and Mulanaitan about scarcity, the influence of scarcity. And education often can't help these big elements, but if you put away the worries of your children while they're in the classroom, without any of the psychological or neurological explanation, but making sure that they have ease of mind while they're in your classroom, so that they can concentrate, that they don't feel frustrated because they are learning something that they don't understand. For me, that's also working on the working memory, but for me, it's also great teaching. That's my 2 pence. Other questions? No? Have a nice day. Bye.